Hey there everyone, Gunnar here. Today we're going to tie a crayfish pattern that I've been working on, and it looks a little something like that. I don't know if you can see that, but it's basically a small, probably 2.5 inch, lightweight crawfish pattern using a Flyman Fishing Company medium shrimp craytail. The entire bug, except for the claws and the little bit of crystal flash, is all Frankenfly monster dubbing. So it's a really quick and easy fly to tie, and it's quite fun. We're going to tie it in a completely random color combo, so it's a little bit more fun and interesting for me, I think. But I have an Arex curved shrimp hook in the vise. It's a really cool hook. It's going to be riding hook down. I like to fish a lot of streamers hook down. It's my preference. I'm not going to be dragging this on the bottom or anything. I'm going to be kind of casting up into shallows and stripping it out over little rock reefs and such. So it's still a quick fly. You could easily invert it with a larger tail. The larger tail would easily invert this hook. The medium probably would struggle with it. So we're just going to use it to add a little bit of jigging weight and kind of help kill the fly as well. So yeah, a curved shrimp hook from Arex Hooks. Got a 100 strand GSP. Gonna thread that up right at the eye, run up to the apex of the bend. So right at the top of the bends where we're gonna stop our thread, and then we're gonna tie this tail in. Now the way I like to tie these tails, right, is gonna be underneath the hook. I'm gonna come up and catch it. I'm leaving a little bit of space behind the hook eye just so I can easily thread that with my tippet when the time comes. I'm going to wrap that back, and I'm going to put some straight pulls on here. If you do a straight pull too hard, this tail will cut your thread because it has relatively squared edges. So just be aware of that. Don't get too crazy with it. But what we're going to do is we're going to come up, bring my thread underneath the hook, but above the tail, right? Just kind of how you would tighten lead eyes. And we're going to add we're going to do 4 securing wraps of that. And then we're good to go, and I'm going to start coming up to this bend. So the reason why I like this hook is you can see it's curved, right? It comes up when you get to this apex. So the front of this fly obviously is going to jig, and it's weighted, so it's going to sink down, and this curve is going to allow my claws to kind of sit up into the air a little bit in like a defensive position. So I think it has a really nice profile. Now this bug wasn't really inspired by any crayfish patterns. I did see a really cool fly that's very similar in kind of how it's tied from Panther Branch Bugs. He has a really cool crayfish pattern that's pretty similar to this, so props to him. But this fly is actually inspired by Danish and Swedish sea trout patterns. It's kind of where I got my inspiration from. I basically just tied one of those and put some claws on it. So I'm coming up. I got 2 strands doubled over. I think this is a medium crystal hackle in brown, and I'm going to do a short little dubbing loop right here, wrapping that up and going right back to that tie-in point. Twister in the loop, half hitched, good to go. I'm going to get my thread out of the way, and basically I'm going to take some orange. Normally I would do tan, so you know, but I'm going to do orange monster dub. Now you don't need a lot for this little dubbing loop. We're just going to orient these fibers here. That'll be enough. Yeah, a little bit more. And I'm going to use this fiber to make a material dam to flare my rabbit legs, right? So I'm just orienting these. I'm going to put them inside my dubbing loop relatively dense. I'm not going to spread them out a whole lot because I want just kind of a short, fat little material dam, and I'm just going to spin those up. I like to make it relatively tight, and I'm going to come in with a dubbing teaser, and I'm going to tease that out. Because what this is going to end up being, 1, material dam, 2, is kind of going to function like the mouth parts. So now we can draw these fibers off to the side, right? And then we're just going to palmer this forward, building a nice, steep, tall, little bump of dubbing here that we're going to use to flare our legs. Awesome. I'm going to take that down the shank just because, I don't know, I'm weird like that. Catch it and wrap back up. Now, I didn't prep my claws, so hold up. We're using a gold rabbit strip variant. It's an 1/8 inch rabbit zonker. Normally I would use grizzly, which is just kind of a natural color. Normally I'd use grizzly, but this is a gold variant. I like the variants too. They have this kind of like modeling textured back. It's a very natural look to them. I think it has a cool texture tone. But the claws are going to be the length, maybe a hair shorter. The length of the hook shank, maybe a hair shorter, is what I was going to say. And then I'm just going to even these up so that they're the same. Now, here's a little trick for you. I'm going to wrap up tight to my dubbing and I'm going to spin my thread counterclockwise. Now what that's going to do, right, my thread is spinning, right, when I bring my thread up and relax it, it's going to fall towards the bend of my hook. It's going to be falling towards my fingers and it's going to be falling towards my rabbit strip. So I can catch that with a loose wrap, which is relatively hard to do with an unspun thread, basically. So that's one advantage to spinning your thread right there, is I can relax my thread and it'll butt up into my material instead of kind of pulling away from it. So I got both my 1/8 inch rabbit strips caught. I'm going to make sure that they're right on the sides. I'm going to add some good tension to those, and then I'm going to wrap rearward, right, towards my hook point here, so that I force those into that material dam and I force those to getting spread out. That's what I really want. Good to go. Now I'm going to come in here, come back down, and I'm going to make a dubbing loop, a relatively big dubbing loop, and I'm going to come up right up onto that little bump there and come back down. Putting my twister back in here. Now then, what we can do is we can take these large or medium crystal hackles, crystal flash, wow, loss of words, eh? And I'm going to cut them probably a full centimeter longer than my claws. I want them to fall away from those claws and be exposed right there. I like that little flashiness. And then I need some ribbing. And this is small ultra wire in the color wine. And I take a pretty good amount just because I don't use this stuff very often. And it's kind of annoying to work with. But I'm going to take my ribbing and I'm going to put it on your side of the hook, the camera side of the hook, right up on top. I'm going to double it over so it can't get pulled out. And I'm actually going to stop this ribbing about a hook eye behind this thread bump. And the reason why is so I can get maybe 2 full turns of dubbing right here that are going to act as the legs, and then I'll rib backwards. That way I don't trap any of that leg dubbing, which I want really long and buggy and webby to get a nice silhouette, right? And then I'm going to stop my thread about a full hook eye behind the hook eye, because I'm going to have to trap basically my dubbing loop, I'm going to have to trap my wire, and I'm going to have to trap my thorn and Carapace, which is also a monster dub that I'm going to have to reverse tie in. And then we're just going to clean up the end with a little bit of dubbing when the time comes. So this dubbing loop, to get the colors that I want here to match this kind of gold variant, we're going to blend tan, brown, and orange monster dub, probably into thirds. We're going to use a third of each for the proportions. I would typically do half and half brown and tan. That makes a pretty awesome color. And I like the top, when we go to do the thorn, to be just slightly darker. I think that makes for a really good looking back. So I have all three right here in my hand, and I'm just going to pinch and pull, right? And you're just going to kind of repeat this process until it's really evenly well mixed. And even if it's not perfectly, you know, that doesn't bother me. Having a little mottling and blotchiness in there is very natural, so it's not a big deal. And I'm going to take, this is quite a lot right here, I'm going to take a little bit out, which I'll probably use to dub on my thread at the end to cover my tie-off point. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to orient all these fibers and I'm going to spread them out, right? Lay them in my dubbing loop. And then, because this is a crawfish, right, I want it to be dense up by these claws and relatively narrow down by this tail. So I'm going to stack quite a bit of the fibers up top here, and then I want it to taper out rather significantly as we move rearward. And you have to remember that that shrimp cray tail is going to add quite a bit of thickness down here. So if you space out that bottom, you can space it out quite a bit. And I'm going to start relatively slowly. And I'm probably going to take a bodkin and get that rabbit hair out of there that's getting caught up. I don't know where mine is. Good enough. Scissors, eh? And we'll spin that up. Now I find this easier if you tease this out first, and then you have to tease it out again after you catch everything. But I like to come through with this dubbing teaser and pull a lot of this out, kind of roughen it up a little bit. It's easier to do it twice than to sit down and try to do it when it's all said and done. So I really want everything really close to these claws, really roughed up, right? Because these are my legs. And the legs right behind the head of a crayfish are extremely prominent. Those legs are everything to the profile. So I really want that roughed up, and then this body stuff is hit or miss. I'd like it to be pretty buggy and webby, so we're going to draw this off to the side, and we're going to try to get two really dense, maybe even 3 turns in front of that ribbing. Right up on top of that thread bump, right up against those claws. Now we're going to come behind our ribbing here, palm ring that all backwards, making sure we're wrapping nice and tight. Right, I can pull really hard with this GSP and it's not going to break. It's one advantage right there. We're going to come back and I space this out dang near perfectly, right? We got a good full hook eye left on the shank, which is what we're going to use to basically tie everything off. And I'm going to catch that dubbing loop a few times, come in and cut her off. Sweet. And then I'm going to throw a half hitch right here. I like to come through and I'm going to pick all this out, and I'm going to draw the fibers that are on top off to the sides, because we're going to lay a carapace, whatever, a thorn, some hard little thing that we're going to rib over top, right? And then I want these legs underneath really picked out, because it's easier to pick them out, catch them, and re-pick them out than it is to pick them out after they've all been caught. So we got a nice flat top. All this dubbing is flared off to the sides. I'm going to take a new mixture that I want darker, right? So I'm going to leave the orange out of it, and we're just going to blend some brown and some tan. Well, I'm going to put just a hint of orange. Seems like a shame not to have it in there. So this is going to be our back, it's going to be our thorn, it's going to be everything, right? So I'm going to pinch this, and I have just a little bit. It's like 70-30 right now. And I'm going to catch that 30, wrapping that forward, and then I'm going to reverse it and put a little tiny bullet right here. Cinch that down, come in front of that, and half hitch. Now, these fibers are all stroked to the side. I'm going to grab this, stretch it out, and we can basically walk our wire around make sure we don't catch too much dubbing if we can avoid it, right? I'm going to catch that right on top. And this should be in my thread holder. Get out of there. I'm going to try to rib this probably 3 times, being relatively prominent on the ribbing, and then I'm going to just wrap it up by this eye. Get it out of the way. Sweet deal. Now we're basically done. Now what I'm going to do is, you can see I have this little black bump right here, right? I'm going to take that little dubbing that we had left over that was already pre-blended, and I'm just going to dub that onto my thread. Do a little bit more. And this is just to cover this little black thread bump that we got right here on the end. Pull that away, and then I'm going to whip finish right here at the hook eye. Just broke my thread, but that's okay because everything's trapped. Awesome. I'm going to put a little bit of super glue there just because I broke my thread. I don't want that going anywhere. I'd be ashamed to ruin it now. Awesome. So you can pick it out with a dubbing teaser. Honestly, I think a bodkin works, there it is, works a bit better to get these legs out of here. So we're just going to untrap these legs from this wire. Now then, I want this back to be a little bit shiny. I want it to be a little bit hardened, and I want to be able to force this kind of horn down over top of these mouth parts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with some Deer Creek UV Diamond Fine Flex, which is kind of a thin, flexible UV curing resin, right? And I'm just going to put it over the top of that dubbing, let it soak in for a second, and then I'm going to cure it. And it's going to give this back a little bit of durability, obviously, but it's also going to give it some shine. So I'm just going to put it right at the base of that horn so I can control that. And then a thin layer, getting skinnier by the eye and wider at the thorn. And we're going to cure that. So that's one thing I didn't like the first couple of times I tied this fly, is I kept doing the proportions backwards because I'm so used to tying bait fish and things. But you really want to get it nice and wide up here where the shoulders of the crayfish are, the head of the crayfish are. You can bring it down onto some of those legs. You really want it to be nice and wide down here. And then you want it to taper towards that eye so it's nice and skinny at the eye of this fly. And that's all she wrote. A sweet dubbing craw. That's actually an awesome color combo. Kind of golden olive. Those legs are flared. We have these nice bright orange kind of mouth parts on that. That's really cool. We got our antenna sticking out, a little bit of flash, dark hard back, right? We have a realistic profile tail. It's going to help keep that hook pointed down in the correct orientation that we want the fly to swim in. Going to give it a little jig. It's going to allow the back of the hook to fall, raising the claws to like a defensive position. That, which coupled with, if you pause this, right, you have the shape of the hook also giving us the same effects, supporting the horn. You have a really nice profile, buggy legs. Yeah. Maybe I'll call it the monster craw because it's monster dubbing.